Have you ever wondered what the difference is in pay and benefits between non-union and union? For that matter, have you ever wondered what the structure is and how it might compare and contrast between non-union and most of America's workforce and their union counterparts in the building trades? Union craftsmen such as pipe fitters and electricians and iron workers, etc. Maybe you've even heard somebody say, my benefits are on top of the check. Well, what does that mean? On today's podcast, we explore those contrasting differences between the two. We look into what it actually means to have benefits on top of the check and aim to clear up any confusion that might be out there about this specific topic. With that in mind, let's go on in the studio and listen to the podcast episode for today. Well, fresh off of teaching apprentices one weekend and a 7-day shutdown that we just finished up, I skipped a week of podcasting just because my time was not my own during that week, but now we're back into it. And one of the discussion points that I noticed when I was talking with apprentices is just how many of them are unaware of the benefit structure, meaning they're unaware of the true value or the true payment that they, as apprentices of a local union in the building trades, that they get. So many of them are unaware of the benefit structure. And I can extrapolate from that and go, okay, well, I know that there are also other people like probationary members, individuals who are interested in signing on and becoming a union member, and even contractors to some degree. What kind of benefits for those who are looking to, right, let's say, be competitive, recruit, retain top talent? What does the benefit structure look like? And how does that all play out? Or you just might be an individual who is actively curious about how it works. Well, that's what today's podcast episode is going to be about. We're going to explore what that looks like. More specifically, I want to explore and compare and contrast, if you will, to the way that the vast majority of people view and articulate how much they get paid. And then we'll look at what it is for a union, let's say a tradesman. So we're talking, when I say building trades, let's define a few things. I'm talking about the iron workers. I'm talking about the pipe fitters. I'm talking about the electricians, so on and so forth. Those individuals that comprise the construction building trades. That's what we're talking about primarily. This doesn't cover every single union structure. I don't have enough knowledge or experience in multiple other, unions, whether it's the service industry or whatever. This is primarily for the construction building trades. Number two, this has been a long time coming, not just an explanation. I talk to people after 23 years in the game. I talk to people on a routine basis, and I get people that will call me and I haven't worked with in a while because they have a question about how something works. They have a question, do you know how to explain this to me better? Can you explain it to this person in such a way that they understand it, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm always up for the challenge because I think that we all should be better educated on a wide variety of subjects, benefits included. And so many people, go through their apprenticeship or even go through their working career, and they don't really, fully understand the structure. And then those who are interested never really understand the structure. So I'm up for the challenge in this podcast episode to try and articulate how that benefit structure is not only organized, but also how we can accurately and articulately explain it to where you go, okay, he's really helped me see the value in what we have going on today. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, we'll start up with what I'm going to say is like the non-union and just the bulk of America's workforce in general and how they view the benefit structure. So I've got a little small cheat sheet here with some numbers, and I'm going to be looking at them as I'm communicating, via this podcast episode. But when someone tells you how much money they make in the bulk of the economy, the bulk of the American economy, if they say, yes, I make $75,000 a year, that's the number we're pulling out of the hat here. That's what we're going to use. When someone says I make $75,000 a year, that's just, first off, that's gross, right? That's before taxes. But we break $75,000 down, it's $1,442 a week, or $36.06 an hour. Most of us tradesmen, non-union and union alike, we equate to what we make per hour, right? Because we're hourly workers. It's par for the course. It's second nature to us to reflect on how much we make per hour. So again, if it's $75,000, which is what the vast majority of, let's say, white collar and various other industries make, let's say $75,000 a year, which breaks down to $1,442 a week, or $36.06 per hour. Now, moving forward from that, number one, it's only gross. So it's automatically reduced because we've got to pay taxes. And that's across the board. And everybody ought to know that by now. But what that $75,000 also doesn't take into account when someone tells you that that's what they make, their benefit structure comes out of that $75,000. So in other words, if they are working for an employer, a non-union iron worker, pipe fitter, whatever, or the vast majority of America's workforce outside of the trades, if they're making $75,000 or $36.06 in the pocket, and if they even are working for an employer that actually offers health insurance, that's a distinction that I want to make sure I'm very clear about. During my time and in my career of just communicating with probably hundreds of people at this point, it should not surprise some people to learn or discover that there are actually companies that you go to work for that work in, let's say, the building trade space that do not offer people benefits at all. That's a bit crazy to me, but after all these years, I'm not surprised to hear it. Nonetheless, if you even work for a contractor or an employer that does indeed offer you health insurance, your portion, right, comes out of your $75,000 package. We're still running underneath that $75,000 package. Now, the numbers that we're going to use here, I've just estimated, and I'm inclined to think that they're probably more than that, but we'll run with this just for the example's sake. And so I decided to run with $150 a week. In other words, out of that $75,000, I'm going to pay for health insurance, right? It could be for me, my family, or whatever, if my employer even offers it. And it's going to cost me $150 a week. Or it cost me $7,800 or $7,800 a year, which roughly turns out to be about $3.75 per hour. When we break it down per hour, that cost for the employee comes out of their $75,000 total package. So we take away out of that $75,000. I have talked to numerous people, again, over the course of my career, who pay a lot more. Now, this is a different podcast episode that will explore this a little bit. But one of the things that I have come to find out After having numerous conversations with other employees and as well as with employers, they, for whatever reason, and a lot of times they end up paying a lot more for their health care coverage, and they get less benefits from it. That's astounding to me, but that seems to be the case in large part. When we compare that to those who are represented underneath a union healthcare insurance program, their benefits are better, and they don't pay often as much as many employers pay, which is also a benefit, if you will, to not just the employee or the union member, but also a benefit to the business or the employer that is actively looking to take care of their employees. Now, to be sure, there are some who are not, but some are looking that way, and that's certainly a benefit. So again, just to recap for the health insurance, we're talking about $150 a week or $7,800 a year that you, the employee, are paying, and it's coming out of your total of $75,000. Moving on to retirement. We're not going to consider the 401k and the match. I just want to use hard numbers for our example. And I estimated, ballpark, again, just for the sake of an example, $100 a week, which is, of course, $5,200 a year, or from an hourly perspective, $2.50 for every hour I work. I'm spending, if I'm going to save $100 a week, then it's going to cost me $2.50 an hour, effectively, since most of us tradesmen think on the hourly level. So we've had the cost of health insurance at $150 a week and retirement at $100 a week. Now, I realize that many people pay more in health insurance and some people don't save squat for retirement. But for the sake of argument and example wise, we're going to run with those two numbers. Well, when you remember, I said you're breaking that $75,000 down to $36.06 an hour. When you take out the cost for health insurance and you take out the cost of what you're saving for retirement, you are now not working for $36.06 an hour. You're actually working for $29.81 an hour, because that difference between $36.06 and $29.81 you paid for. So your hourly rate has then effectively been reduced. And you went from making $75,000 a year to $62,000 a year. So in other words, this is how the vast majority of America's workforce and their benefit structure, this is how they articulate or understand how their benefits are paid. I have a total package, and then my benefits, if I even have the available health insurance or retirement through my employer, my benefits come out of that, out of my pocket, and are paid that way. That's how the vast majority of America's workforce do it. And certainly for non-union building trades, non-union iron workers, non-union pipe fitters, etc. Fast forward now. Remember, I said we were going to compare. Now we're going to compare and contrast that to the union's benefit structure. When you talk to a union craftsman, whether it's, he could be an IBEW, which is an electrical union. He could be a UA or a pipe fitter. He could be an iron worker, a crane operator. It could be a millwright. It doesn't really matter who it is. Somebody it's a union craftsman. When you talk to that person, all right, we talk in terms of how much money we make per hour. And you will hear, I have said this every single Apprentice Spotlight podcast episode that I've had up here, and I say it routinely throughout my day-to-day conversations, but there is a statement that we say over and over again. Our benefits are on top of the check. So while the previous explanation of the $75,000 a year, it's working we're going down, right? We're taking a total number and we're whittling away that number. We're going downward in a sense. We started at 75,000, and after we estimated the benefits that I explained, we ended up at 62,000 just before, right? Before even taxes. Union craftsmen explain this the exact opposite way. We think in terms of how much do I make per hour, and most of us do not even consider how much the benefit package costs us or is contributed, because it doesn't come out of our check. It's actually contributed on top of our check. So it's the exact opposite way from non-union craftsmen or non-union employers and then the vast majority of America's workforce. Most people are unaware of this. They just don't know, and that's fine. But after this podcast episode, they're going to be made aware. And for those of you union craftsmen who are unaware of this, now you have a resource then to re-listen or re-watch, depending on how you consume your content, to try and adequately understand the benefit structure. And just like the first example, I have figures that we're going to run with. Just figures. This cannot possibly cover everyone across this country and whatnot, just like the first one doesn't. The numbers, the figures, the amounts. But we're going to use what I believe is probably fairly reasonable to try and articulate the way that the benefit structures are kind of laid out. So starting off, I'm going to list how much my example is by hour. And that's primarily because that's how union craftsmen think about it. And for our example, we're going to use $33 an hour. Now, at first comparison, you might think, well, the first example was at $36.06 or $75,000 a year. Now you mean to tell me that we're going to make $33 an hour. But remember, the benefits are on top. And as we go through this example, it'll be made clear to you. That $33 an hour turns out to be $1,320 a week, or from a yearly total, it's $68,640. That's what $33 an hour gets the union craftsman, okay? So we're also going to run under I use the same exact numbers in the health insurance, meaning $150 a week. If you are in the union craftsman space, you have access to health insurance. And so we're going to assume that $150 a week is contributed into the healthcare fund on your behalf, which equates to $7,800 a year that's contributed into that fund, or $3.75 per hour that you work is contributed into that fund. The hour figure plays out considerably because for every hour you work, it's contributed in. If you worked 32 hours, then 32 times 3.75 is contributed in. It's not a full 40. I'm just kind of giving you the numbers to help you out understand what it is per week. But the hour mark is, because we work per hour, that's why it's important to delineate which one is which. And that's the health insurance. I might also add too, by the way, that we're rounding it out at $150 per hour, meaning if we worked 40 hours a week, we're contributing $3.75 per hour on top of the check. Remember that, into the healthcare fund. If you work less hours, you contribute less. That same figure that I used in the first example, you're going to pay $150 a week, whether you work 32 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours, it doesn't matter. Yours is a blanket cost that comes out of your check. Not so for the union craftsman. That amount is contributed on his behalf for every hour that he works, he or she, it works into those funds. And the figure that we're going to focus on is $3.75. All right. Now, on to retirement. I'm making an assumption here, but every single union craftsman, barring, doesn't matter what trade they're in, everyone that I've talked to anyway, has two different types of retirement funds. We can explore those at a later date. But for simplicity's sake, they have a pension fund, which is a defined benefit plan, and you have an annuity. Most of the time it's called an annuity, but it's really, to make it easy, we'll call it a 401k. Most of us know, most of the union craftsmen that you'll talk to, if you even know any of them, they call it an annuity fund, but it's actually like a 401k. Even financial professionals often confuse the terms because they're unaware that what it really is something akin to a 401k. But the vast majority of union craftsmen that I'm aware of and that I have talked to and had conversations with, they have two different retirement funds. Now, we're going to use the figure of $6 an hour into that pension fund. So in other words, for every hour that the union craftsman works, $6 goes into a pension fund on his behalf. And again, this is on top of his check. It doesn't come out of his $33. It's on top of that check. That $6 an hour equates to $240 a week, or on the yearly scale, it's $12,480. So if you worked 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, then that's the figure. It would be $12,480 that's contributed into the pension fund on your behalf. But the hourly rate, $6. The second fund, retirement fund, the annuity fund, or the 401k, if you will, we use a figure of $4 an hour. Now, again, I realize that these numbers are a little lower in some parts of our country, and some of them might even be a little higher than some parts of our country, depending on where you're at. But I think they're fairly reasonable to use for our example. And so we're going to use $4 an hour into the annuity fund, or 401k. That equates to $160 a week, or $8,320 a year. So in other words, in the retirement fund space for the union craftsman, in the example that I've given or used, they have $10 an hour going into two different types of retirement. That $10 an hour is on top of their 33. And so now when we say I make $33 an hour, or $1,320 a week, or $68,640 a year, now we add to it, right? So I want you to think about that $68,640, because that's what a lot of people would hear, and they think, okay, well, you're paying benefits out of that. But for the union craftsman, your benefits are on top of the check. So we take that $10 an hour that is contributed on your behalf into those retirement funds and add that to the $3.75 per hour that we're using for the health care fund. And we add that to your total package. So in other words, you don't make $33 an hour. That's what you make in the pocket. What your total package happens to be, when we estimate in our example, the healthcare coverage, the retirement, and then your hourly wage in your pocket, you're actually making $46.75 an hour in our example, or $1,870 a week. And here's where the numbers look a lot bigger. When we add the benefit package that's on top of the check to what union craftsmen make in the pocket, in our example, we went from $68,640 in the pocket to $97,240 total package. That's a sizable difference. And when we lack the perspective, or someone has not taken the time to explain it to us, and how we can sit down and go, okay, well, that makes perfect sense to me. Now I understand it. And so now my interest is piqued. I want benefits, et cetera, et cetera. That's the difference. And it's a significant difference. Remember, with the first example, and with this is where most of America's economy is, we're focusing on how much the total package is, and then we take and we reduce it out. We turn that model up on its head by saying, here's how much I get in my pocket. Oh, by the way, the benefits are on top of the check. So when a union craftsman tells you, in our example, he's making $33 an hour, that's in his pocket. None of his benefits come out of that $33 an hour. Instead, his benefits are already negotiated. A set amount per hour is going to be contributed into those funds automatically. And it's managed, and it's and that particular type of structure is what a lot of people are unaware of. Which is why this podcast episode is, in my opinion, so vital. Because there's a lot of people who just don't, if you don't know, you don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. After this podcast episode, now you know. Again, these are just examples. In some states, they're higher than others. In some states, they're significantly different. But this is a good example to compare the non-union pay structure, if you will, to the union pay structure. It's decidedly and markedly different. And we'll have a different podcast episode down the line to explain actually the importance of benefits. But caveat before we, land this plane and end this podcast episode, anybody who's telling you that benefits don't matter is lying to you in a most egregious way, because benefits matter tremendously. 2/3 of all bankruptcies in this country come from medical debt. And 2/3 of all of those, 2/3 of all medical bankruptcy debt cases actually come from people who had medical insurance. Chew on that one for a little bit. And so your benefits matter tremendously. This is especially true as you get older and you start to accumulate a family, right? You start to gather up a spouse and you've got kids and you're doing this and that. Your benefit structure is vital. And if you don't work for an employer that either offers that, you might want to look at getting a new employer, or you might want to look at organizing your workplace. Because if many of the workplaces that, if they're looking to legitimately take care of their employees, there are ways to do this. And one of the better ways to do it, obviously, is to join into the benefit structure program that a local union offers or avails to them. Benefits matter. And so there we have it. And that's the end of this podcast episode. We took a look at non-union pay structure, if you will, and the union building trades pay structure. And I hope I have been able to clear a few things up. If you have some questions, feel free to send me an email over there at thewealthyironworker.com, or what you can also do is comment on the video, and I'll see emails before I see the comments, but nonetheless, I'll respond and try, and I'll even do podcast episodes if that's what's necessary or needed to even more greatly explain a benefit structure or question that somebody may have regarding this issue. So there we are. There's a podcast in a nutshell. I thank you for listening or watching. I'll see you on the next one.